3 million new documents. Who is in the Epstein files? Who isn't? We're going back to the moon. Well, sort of, kind of, probably, maybe. Are we really alone out there? My name is Marty Scoveland Jr., and this is the Marty Party. Let's get this party started.
It's a Marty Party.
Okay. What an intro. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about the Epstein files. We're talking about the Artemis 2 mission up to the moon eventually. And I want to talk about some some parenting stuff today too. And then of course a little dash of UFOs, UAPs, aliens, what they're not telling us, what they are telling us. Some really interesting stuff today. Now, for this portion of the show, specifically as I talk about these Epstein files, basically there was 3 million new documents released a couple days ago. And what was in those documents is spreading all over the internet, all over social media, new revelations on certain things. We're finding, I guess a new level of depravity between Epstein and his circle. And his circle was a lot of people that we recognize the names of. We're going to get into all that. I think we need to start, though, with a little bit of a baseline reset because there's so much hype around this. There's so much that people are talking about this file release and really the events of, let's call it, the past year. And I think a lot of people don't realize that this Epstein saga, for lack of a better term, goes back over 20 years. Like, this goes back quite some time. So I want to run through a timeline here and bring everybody up to speed. Let's go all the way back to March 2005, where police in Palm Beach, Florida, began an investigation into Epstein after the family of a 14-year-old girl reported she was molested at his mansion down there in Florida. Now, there were multiple underage girls, many of them high school students, later told police Epstein hired them to give sexual massages. So already right off the bat, this is 2005. Guys being accused of some pretty heinous stuff with underage girls. May 2006, just a year and a couple months later, Palm Beach police officially signed paperwork to charge Epstein with multiple counts of unlawful sex with a minor. But the county's top prosecutor, State Attorney Barry Kreischer, took the unusual step of sending the case to a grand jury. A couple months later, July 2006, funny to think I just left on my first deployment to Iraq on July 4th, 2006. So this was happening around the same time as I was going off for my first trip to the Middle East. July 2006, Epstein is arrested after a grand jury indicts him on a single count of soliciting prostitution. This relatively minor charge is criticized immediately, obviously, when we're talking about underage kids and sexual massages and all that sort of stuff, and the only thing he's getting hit with is soliciting a prostitute. This is something that a lot of people are upset about, and it included the Palm Beach police leaders who publicly accused Kreischer, the state's attorney, of giving Epstein special treatment. This is also when the FBI begins their investigation. So, quick catch up here. 2005, the state of Florida starts looking into him after complaints from some of his earlier victims. It isn't until 2006 that the FBI starts looking into him. In 2007, federal prosecutors prepare an indictment against Epstein, but Epstein's lawyers negotiate with U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, that name will come up again later, about a plea bargain that would allow Epstein to avoid federal prosecution. They claim Epstein's alleged victims are unreliable witnesses. Yeah. You judge for yourself on that one. June 2008, under a secret arrangement, of course, that's the only arrangements that happen with Epstein, the U.S. Attorney's Office agrees not to prosecute Epstein for federal crimes. Wow. Instead, Epstein pleads guilty to state charges, including 1 count of soliciting prostitution and 1 count of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18. So I guess they're at least recognizing at that point that his heinous acts involved minors, which I think is an important distinction. He's sentenced to 18 months in jail, but he spent most of that time on work release, where he'd leave in the morning and come back at night. And from what I can tell, he didn't even serve the full term. That happened in June 2008, July 2009, only 13 months at the most later, Epstein was released from jail. For the next decade, multiple women who say they are Epstein's victims waged a legal fight to get his federal non-prosecution agreement. That was that agreement that they made, is that the feds would not prosecute him if he accepted those charges of soliciting a prostitute and soliciting somebody under the age of 18. So, yeah, quite the agreement, right? Considering what the guy was responsible for. But they were, these victims were trying to get that agreement voided in order to hold him and the others around him liable for the abuse they experienced. One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Giuffre, who, again, you've probably heard that name recently, said in her lawsuits that starting when she was 17 years old, Epstein and his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently sitting in prison, set up sexual encounters with royalty, politicians, academians, businessmen, and other rich and powerful people, including Britain's Prince Andrew. And not surprising to literally anyone on planet Earth, all of those accused denied the allegations against them. Yeah, real shocker there. Now, November 2018, this is 9 years later at this point. That happened in 2009. Now we're up to November 2018. The Miami Herald revisits the handling of Epstein's case in a series of stories focusing partly on the role of Acosta, because now that old state's attorney is 9 years later the labor secretary for President Donald Trump's first term. And so he's a cabinet member in the United States government. And the Miami Herald's looking into him because he arranged this really strange plea deal with a sex trafficker named Jeffrey Epstein. The coverage renews public interest in the case, to say the least. Now, about 6 months later, July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges after federal prosecutors in New York concluded they weren't bound by the terms of the earlier non-prosecution deal. So I don't know what legal jujitsu happened, but they were able to get around that deal. It was only a few days later that Acosta resigned as the labor secretary because everybody was rightfully pissed the fuck off. That guy who made that deal was a sitting cabinet member. A month later, August 10th, 2019, guards find Jeffrey Epstein, dead in his cell at a federal jail in New York City. This is where a lot of you started to become aware of this guy, Jeff Epstein, right? Was when he initially committed suicide in a jail cell. Investigators concluded he killed himself. Almost everybody else concluded he did not kill himself because we weren't fucking born yesterday. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, later released security camera footage from inside the prison. Outside analysis determined, or at least suggested, that the footage might have been edited, and up to 2 minutes and 53 seconds were missing from the security camera footage inside the jail. The House Oversight Committee later released a version with at least some of the missing footage, but according to a lot of outlets out there and a lot of reports, there's still footage missing, and I don't think we're ever going to see that, at least not in the next few years. July 2nd, 2020. Federal prosecutors in New York charged Ghislaine Maxwell with sex crimes, saying she helped recruit the underage girls that Epstein sexually abused and sometimes participated in the abuse herself. So at least one person is being held accountable here. December 30th, 2021, after a month-long trial, a jury convicts Maxwell of multiple charges, including sex trafficking, conspiracy, and transportation of a minor for illegal sexual activity. I think and she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She didn't get sentenced until about another 6 months later, which was kind of crazy. But I think it's key to note, she was actually convicted of sex trafficking, conspiracy, transportation of a minor. I want to come back to this later, because if she was trafficking people, Who was she trafficking them to? Right? All right. January 2024. Public interest in the Epstein case surges again after a judge unsealed thousands of pages of court records in a civil lawsuit involving one of his victims. Almost all of the information was already public, and the days-long document dump proved kind of disappointing. But it fueled demand for even more records to be made public. At this point, conspiracy theories are just completely full tilt, and people think more than ever that something's being hidden. And really, the only argument is who's doing the hiding, or is just fucking everybody in on it. I tend to think more the latter at this point. During 2024, Trump, who was in office when Epstein was arrested, suggested during the presidential campaign that he'd seek to open the government's Epstein files. You can go back and look at a lot of his campaign speeches, basically uncovering the truth behind Epstein and his operation and his death was, I don't want to call it a central, like, core tenet of his campaign, but it was brought up on a regular basis. And so now we go up to February 2025. This is just about a year ago today, right? Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a Fox News Channel interview that an Epstein, quote, client list was sitting on her desk. The Justice Department distributed binders marked declassified to influencers at the White House. We all saw that footage. A bunch of influencers come walking out of the White House, holding up binders and like, hey, we got it all. Except it pretty much quickly became clear that much of the information had already just been in the public domain, and there was no new information that came out of that public display of binder distribution. July 7th, 2025, the Justice Department said Epstein didn't maintain a client list, and it won't make any more files related to his sex trafficking investigation public. Quite the reversal. July 17th, 2025, 10 days later, the Wall Street Journal described a sexually suggestive letter that the newspaper said bore Trump's name and was included in a 2003 album for Epstein's 50th birthday. Trump denied writing the letter, calling it false, malicious, and defamatory, and the next day Trump sued the Wall Street Journal and media mogul Rupert Murdoch, who owns the Wall Street Journal, or owns the company that owns the Wall Street Journal. And I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was quite the letter, and obviously it'll play out in court whether it was authentic or not. July 18th, 2025, the very next day, the Trump administration asked a federal court to unseal grand jury transcripts related to Epstein's case in an effort to put a political crisis to rest. This was a full-bore political crisis after the Wall Street Journal ran copies of that letter. July 23rd, 2025, almost a week later, a judge rejects a Trump administration request to unseal transcripts from the Epstein grand jury investigation in Florida, but similar requests for grand jury transcripts in the cases against Epstein and Maxwell in New York remain pending. Meanwhile, a House Oversight Subcommittee voted to subpoena the Justice Department for files. The full committee issued a subpoena for Maxwell to testify before committee officials in August. So, I want to, again, this is where it's not fair to pin this all on one person, the cover-up or anything like that. This judge doesn't answer to any president or anything. You've got a judge saying, we're not going to release these transcripts and some of the evidence and stuff. So there's a lot of different possibilities here on who all is complicit in keeping certain information hidden. November 18th, 2025, Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Literally took an act of fucking Congress. Won't be the last time we talk about an act of Congress to just tell the fucking truth in this podcast. Just wait till later. This Epstein Files Transparency Act required the Department of Justice to publish all Epstein-related investigative materials within 30 days. President Trump signed the bill into law himself. December 19th, 2025. This is about a month later, the day after the deadline. The Department of Justice issued a first batch of files by the statutory deadline, but released only a fraction of what was required. So this wasn't all of the files. They released some of them. I imagine this was just as far as they got into all the files, reviewing them themselves so that they could edit and blackline and all that sort of stuff. Many of the documents were heavily redacted or just altogether unavailable, which drew bipartisan criticism as well as criticism from all of us about whether they were complying with the law that Trump himself signed. And this is important because when you look at those documents, there's entire pages that are redacted. Entire pages. Like, it wasn't the act of transparency that everybody hoped or that the law demanded. January 30th, 2026, this is just a couple of days ago. Under the Transparency Act, the Department of Justice published its largest tranche yet of Epstein materials, over 3 million pages. I think it's closer to 3.5 million pages of documents, including 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. Now, the Department of Justice officials stated this release brought the department into compliance with the law, with that Epstein Transparency Act, and the material included all of the investigative files. This is the tranche that everybody's talking about right now. All the screenshots you're seeing on social media and things like that. This is that batch. There was also correspondence, court records, emails, photos, and videos from federal inquiries into Epstein's activities. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said the files contained images and communications involving Epstein's networks and associates, but insisted that no evidence from the files justified new criminal charges against additional individuals. So again, we got Epstein dead. We got Ghislaine Maxwell sitting in prison for trafficking, yet still nobody that has what was the client, was the buyer, was the person asking them to traffic these people, right? Even though, as you scroll through all these, there's all sorts of people asking about or talking about the girls that Jeffrey Epstein would find for them. So who has been mentioned in the files so far? This is where I'm going to run through a bunch of names, right? Now, I don't want to say that this is a complete list. Please don't gotcha me in the comment section of why didn't you put this person in there? There's a lot of people. I'm already going to go through a lot of people, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, basically, on the notable people that you'll find within these documents. Also, I think it's important to say that I'm not saying that the things these documents discuss about these people is true. That's for a court to decide. I'm saying this is what the documents contain, and this is how major news outlets are reporting it. Okay, so let's go through the list of people and how they're mentioned. Ooh, a little coffee break here. We've been going hard. I'm going to talk about this mug a little bit later. All right, steamy. Is the camera picking that up? Just nice and... not really. You have to trust. There's notional steam as far as you're concerned. The steam is real here. All right, people mentioned in the Epstein documents. We'll start off right at the top. President Donald Trump. Everybody obviously knows he's mentioned in there. His name appears repeatedly in the documents, including references to social interactions with Epstein. And the Department of Justice has said his presence in the files is not evidence of criminal conduct. Of course, depending on how you feel about the guy, everybody's got a different opinion about that. If you're a Trump supporter, you are vehemently defending him. If you're an anti-Trump person, then you are convinced that he is the worst of the worst and, because of this shouldn't be president. Then we've got billionaire Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk emails allegedly between him and Epstein, allegedly, about social visits and island invitations appear in the records. In a November 25, 2012 email, I'd like to point out, by the way, it's just, November 25th, 2012. The reason I wanted to go through that timeline earlier was to point out that there was really no reason for anybody to not be aware that he was a convicted sex offender later than, say, 2007. Right? Because the legal trouble started in 2005. So all of these people that are communicating with him, socializing with him, they're doing it fully knowing that he's a convicted sex offender. And no, ignorance is not a plausible defense here. So Elon Musk, November 25th, 2012 email. Epstein allegedly asked Musk how many people he would be bringing for the helicopter ride to the island. Musk allegedly responded, quote, probably just Tallulah and me. Now, Tallulah Riley was Musk's wife at the time. Musk then allegedly asked, quote, what day/night will be the wildest party on your island, question mark. On Christmas Day, he allegedly sent another note asking again about parties. Quote, do you have any parties planned, question mark. I've been working to the edges of sanity this year, and so... comma, once my kids head home after Christmas, comma, I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose, period. The invitation is much appreciated, but a peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for, end quote. Next up, we've got billionaire Bill Gates. Now, Epstein's emails include unverified claims drafted by Epstein about Gates, and included everything from getting him drugs to, quote, sex with Russian girls, end quote, which Gates's representatives have, of course, denied. Then we've got the, so let me see if I can pronounce this name correctly, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew. Everybody knows him as Prince Andrew. He's the brother of King Charles, the current King of England, and son of the late Queen Elizabeth. He has been stripped of his royal title in the wake of his alleged connections to Epstein, and newly released photos appear to show him on all fours over an unidentified female. The face is blacked out. He has repeatedly denied wrongdoing. Next up, we've got Howard Lutnick. He is the current U.S. Commerce Secretary, so another cabinet-level figure. And he is referenced in emails coordinating travel to Epstein's island with his family in 2012, where they allegedly spent time. Lutnick previously claimed that he had cut ties with Epstein in 2005. Steve Tisch. He's the co-owner of the New York Giants, the New York Football Giants. New emails allegedly show exchanges between he and Epstein about women and social plans, including one where Tisch allegedly asks for details about a, quote, Ukrainian girl, quote, who allegedly had lunch with him after meeting at Epstein's house. Next up, Steve Bannon. If you don't know, of Breitbart fame, was a chief strategist, or I don't remember what his exact title was for Trump during his first term. Divisive media figure, I would say. Steve Bannon. So the Epstein documents included video from an interview Bannon conducted with Epstein. And so that's not the concerning part. Like Bannon is a journalist of sorts, right? And he was interviewing Epstein on camera. So this wasn't like some, hey, they're hanging out at Epstein's island or something like that. That's not what was going on. But here's where it gets a little bit dicey. Emails from November and December 2018 indicate Epstein sent Steve Bannon and his son, Sean Bannon, Hermes Apple Watches, which were priced, from what I read online, about $1,500 a piece at the time. So make of that what you will. Next up, Brett Ratner. He's an American movie director and producer. You might have heard of some of his movies. He directed all the Rush Hour movies, and he also did X-Men: The Last Stand, among many others, including the recently released Melania documentary. And he's also executive produced some of my favorite movies, frankly, War Dogs and The Revenant. I love those movies. Well, in 2017, multiple women accused Ratner of sexual misconduct. That's been out in the open for some time now. Photos in the Epstein files, though, allegedly show Ratner with his arms around a female in a white top on a couch next to Epstein, who is shoulder to shoulder with another female. Peter Thiel. He's a prominent, again, another, I believe, billionaire. Yeah, billionaire. He's a prominent German-American billionaire entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and political donor known for co-founding PayPal and Palantir Technologies, as well as being Facebook's first outside investor. That's important to note. The Epstein files indicate Thiel met with Epstein multiple times between 2014 and 2017 and was in communication with him at least until 2019. Okay, and then we've got Dr. Mehmet Oz, or just Dr. Oz as he's known in the media. He's a talk show host who now heads the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the Department of Health and Human Services. So again, he's working in the government right now in the current Trump administration. Records allegedly show travel arrangements paid for by Epstein, along with other interactions, including an email sent from Oz to Epstein in 2016, but the message is redacted. Of course, there's a lot of interesting things that are redacted, including where, not specifically from Dr. Oz, I don't know, but I've seen other messages where some sort of heinous, depraved things are being talked about in the body of the email, and the from line is blacked out. And it's like, who are we protecting here? Why aren't we showing who sent that email to Epstein? Hopefully this all comes out at some point. Next up, Catherine Rumler. She was the associate White House counsel to former President Bill Clinton and the White House counsel under former President Obama from 2011 to 2014. And she's currently the chief legal officer and general counsel at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs. Sachs. As a native South Dakotan, I have problems with A's, bagel, flag, things like that. And I know that's not the way everybody else not from South Dakota pronounces it. Her name appears in emails expressing personal familiarity with Epstein, including one email to a redacted recipient where she allegedly said, quote, "I adore him, period. It's like having another older brother, ! End quote. Woody Allen. We've all heard of Woody Allen before. He's acted in, directed, and written many movies since the 1960s. Sort of a legend of sorts, or at least was in Hollywood. There's alleged text messages exchanged between Allen and Epstein in the files, including a 2015 text exchange where Epstein allegedly asked Allen if he wants to have a, quote, day museum White House trip, quote, the next week. At that time, that was 2015, so that means President Barack Obama was in office at the time. I'm not saying Obama was involved in that. I'm just giving frame of reference for Epstein and Woody Allen trying to allegedly arrange a visit to the White House. President Bill Clinton. So we've got multiple presidents mentioned throughout all of this. Previous files showed photos and references to the 42nd president of the United States' prior association with Epstein. The former president allegedly flew on Epstein's plane multiple times and has numerous photos with Epstein. By the way, if you're wondering why I keep saying allegedly on all of this stuff, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trying to get involved in lawyers and all that other stuff and like some he said, she said. Judge for yourself in these documents what you believe. I'm just telling you the rundown of how and when these people were mentioned in the files. I'm not claiming to know the veracity of the files or the accuracy of any of the information in them about people. Take that for what you will, but just all of this is allegedly and claimed, and I'm couching my speech in that for that reason. Next up, billionaire. We got a couple billionaires. We got presidents and we got billionaires. Epstein sure had a type. Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder and CEO, appeared in an email alleging his presence at an event connected to Epstein in 2009. Okay, Miroslav Lajčák, I don't know. He's a Slovak diplomat and former head of the UN General Assembly. So not nothing. His name appears extensively in email correspondence, including texts from October 2018 when he was still Slovakia's foreign minister. Lajčák allegedly asked Epstein, quote, "Why don't you invite me for these games, ? I would take the MI girl, period, end quote. Who wouldn't? Epstein replied. You, quote, "You can have them both. I am not possessive, period. And they're sisters," end quote. Next up, Dr. Peter Attia. He's a well-known physician and longevity expert, author of a very well-known book and a very well-known podcast host. He's mentioned over 1,700 times, including one message where Attia allegedly tells Epstein, quote, just in case you have kids listening here, I won't say the word out loud, but a crude reference for female genitalia. Okay, like put that in brackets there because I'm not going to say the word out loud. And then he picks up saying is, comma, indeed, comma, low carb, period. Still awaiting results on gluten content, comma, though, period, end quote. So blank is indeed low carb, still awaiting results on gluten content, though. Attia admitted that he met with Epstein at his home in New York City 7 or 8 times between 2014 and 2019. I will again bring up all of these interactions with these people during the, between 2008, 9 and forward are all after he was already a convicted sex offender. All right. So again, not all of these people are automatically guilty of rape, pedophilia, and sex trafficking. Of course, just because you're mentioned in there doesn't make you automatically guilty. But for the rest of us, this is a very stark reminder that you should be very careful about who you associate yourself with. Now, I think it's true that sort of career advice people get, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But just remind yourself, if you follow that advice, you can and will be judged on who you quote know. And I think that there's no more of a glaring example of that than these people that were at a very minimum socializing with Jeffrey Epstein. So who's not in the files? All those people are mentioned in the files in some capacity, whether they allegedly directly communicate with Epstein, or they were just mentioned in emails between other people. Everybody that I just talked about are in the Epstein files in one capacity or another. Who's not in the files? I thought this was a fun exercise. Sex trafficking and trafficking minors is not a joke, but I want to do this as a bit of almost satire to illustrate the fact that all those people, many of them are held in very high regard in society. Many of the people I'm about to mention are not, yet they don't show up in the Epstein files. So right off at the top here, guess who's not in the Epstein files? Charlie Sheen. He's a renowned actor and renowned party animal. I do believe he has since sort of sobered up and is doing amazing. But again, I think he's somebody that people wouldn't have been shocked if Charlie Sheen was in there, but he's not in there. Howard Stern, that famous talk show host who would literally have women live on his show riding vibrators. Yeah, he's not in the Epstein files. Jimmy Kimmel, he's the current late night host and the former host of The Man Show. Oh yeah, remember that show, especially if you're like a millennial or older. It was that show where they would close out each episode with having women or girls, whatever, all over the age of 18, I'm sure, jumping on a trampoline in various states of dress or undress. Kanye West. I'm not saying Kanye West is a good person either, but the famous musician who has claimed to be a Nazi in the past is not in the Epstein files. And, the fact that he claimed to be a Nazi in the past, I guess that probably kind of should make it not surprising that he wasn't an associate of Jeffrey Epstein. Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt's not in the Epstein files. Yeah, sure. Is he a fictional Star Wars character? Yes. But also, he literally kept women chained up as slaves. So, yeah, guy, animal, thing that keeps women chained up as slaves, not in the Epstein files. Tom Cruise. I'm a big Tom Cruise fan, by the way. So, again, not putting Tom Cruise and some of these other people in like the same moral category. But I think, he's like a renowned Scientologist. And I think, again, there's a lot of people that maybe wouldn't be surprised if the Eyes Wide Shut guy was like in the Epstein files. But he's not. He steered clear of all of that. Joe Rogan. He's the most successful podcast host in the world. Second place isn't even close. And he is a person, I think because of his position at the top, a person that a lot of people love to hate. Has he said things that weren't entirely true in the past? Yes. Is he wildly entertaining? Yes. Does he claim to know what he's talking about all the time? No. Does he just ask questions and is he just curious about the world? Yes. I think he's a good person. But you know what? The biggest evidence of the fact that he's a good person is the fact that he never felt the need to associate with a guy like Jeffrey Epstein, even though I bet he certainly had the opportunity to. A lot of these people probably had the opportunity to associate with him and did not. Dennis Rodman, remember him? Yeah, I'm a 90s NBA basketball fan, 90s, early 2000s. Let's call it the Kobe era. The former Chicago Bulls legend was known for erratic behavior and frequent trips to Las Vegas. I think he got himself into hot water with the team at times. He was even one of the Detroit Bad Boys when he was with the Pistons. But he was known as quite a wild guy back in his heyday. He was not mentioned even a single time in the Epstein files. Now, like I said, most of these people have nothing in common with each other. I just mentioned them as people who have faced stiff criticism in the public eye in the past, and many people just automatically assume the worst about. Yet, all the people that actually are mentioned in the Epstein files are politicians and billionaires and business people, things like that are all held in very high esteem. I just think it's an interesting contrast, and it contrasts, I think, the way we as the general public assigns our blame in our society. It illuminates maybe some of the misdirection of cancel culture, all of that. So do with all of that what you will. Now, what was actually released in these files, this latest 3 million plus, after being mandated by the Epstein Files Transparency Act passed in late 2025, the DOJ published millions of pages of documents, thousands of images, and hundreds of videos tied to federal investigations into Jeffrey Epstein and his network. That's a fact. A lot of the released material comes from civil discovery, not sealed grand jury indictments. So again, this is not every piece of paper ever connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Being mentioned in the documents or correspondence does not mean someone is guilty or under investigation. It also doesn't mean they are innocent either. And it would behoove anyone mentioned in the files to get ahead of this and sort of explain themselves and their connection. I have seen some people doing that, and basically tell the world why they thought it was appropriate to have anything to do with a guy like Jeffrey Epstein and his ilk, for that matter. So that was what was actually released. What the files actually confirm, right, when you go through them. Epstein's network and operations were extensive and long-running. This was not a short little blip in time. This was an extensive network, and it happened over many, many years. The files give a broader view of communications, travel logs, and interactions between Epstein and numerous high-profile individuals, some of them that we just mentioned. And survivors, lawsuits, and the civil claims that have been made are valid in asking for transparency. Those people are not full of it. They're not, what was that thing? Some of the victims were called as unreliable witnesses. These people have a valid claim. We see that much in just what's been released, despite all the redactions. And it also confirms that there's an elite class of individuals that think they are above the law in public scrutiny. They might be right, unfortunately. In some ways, I feel like a lot of these people are just looking us as Americans and the entire world dead in the eyes and saying, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? All right. What do the files not confirm? They do not by themselves prove criminal conduct by everybody mentioned. They do not provide a definitive list of Epstein's clients. So that's a fact. This is not a definitive list of clients, and there's not enough in there that proves criminal conduct on its own. That we can see. Again, there's so many redactions, you can't say that there's not enough to at least investigate other people, but when you've got names blocked out and things like that, I don't know. And, what do we still not know after all this? Many documents are still heavily redacted, and some pages have been deleted by the Department of Justice after being released. Good thing that there's lots of people out there taking screenshots of all this stuff as soon as they open up. We still don't know whether any of the newly released documents will lead to future charges. Officials are saying right now that there's nothing in there to go investigate, but who knows what will happen in the future. We still don't know what additional files might still be withheld out there. I think a very valid question for a lot of us is, what are they still not showing us? And then we still don't know who the fuck Epstein and Maxwell, who were definitely guilty of sex trafficking, were actually trafficking too. Remember, Maxwell's in prison right now for sex trafficking, but not a single person has been arrested for paying for those services. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Now, public misunderstanding and social media around all of this has been varied and wide, and it's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it today. It's why I wanted to run through a timeline, run through facts, who's in it, who's not in it, all of that, because there is a lot just kind of going around right now. There have been numerous instances of misinformation and disinformation just going absolutely viral, and we have to remember that we live in the age of AI, and it's somewhat easy for people, not just with AI, Photoshop, other things, right, to present to alter documents that otherwise look legitimate, to alter photos, to do all sorts of different things, post it online, say it's out of the Epstein files, and just trust that all the people that are clicking share on it or commenting or engaging with that post are not actually going into the database of files and looking up to verify that it is in fact a true image or file. And so you've just got a lot of people that are just after clicks and will do literally anything, whether it's moral, ethical, or not. and posting AI slop and doctored documents online just to get a viral moment. Now, the outrage you're seeing online is bipartisan. This is one thing that I really appreciate, is the fact that this is a conspiracy that spans both political parties. You saw Clinton, who's a Democrat, Trump, who's a Republican, people from both administrations, people of all different political varieties and beliefs are in the Epstein files. So this goes beyond political parties or even just our nation. This is an international incident at this point. People of all stripes want transparency and justice. And gosh, I mean, I would hope if there's anything that we can agree on, it's the fact that, yeah, man, if you're trafficking kids and doing it for years and years and years to the most important people on earth, yeah, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, gay, straight, bi, black, white, Latino, whatever it is, that's fucked up. And we want the truth. I guess overall, I want to make clear that I don't make light of the situation, and it's something that I hope we all stay on and we don't get distracted from as we get hit with news cycle after news cycle. I believe that the Epstein files and justice and transparency around that is worth paying attention to, and we should stay engaged, and we should stay skeptical of the things that we see on social media and always be in pursuit of the truth. On to a lighter topic. One thing that I am very excited about. Another coffee break here. Ooh, still hot. Still hot. Love that mug. All right, a little bit of happier topic. The Artemis 2 mission. You may have been hearing recently that, I've seen reels and posts all over social media about, like, we're going back to the moon. Did you know we're going back to the moon? Like, and it's happening soon. Well, I want to use part of this to say, hey, yeah, we are in pursuit of going back to the moon, and that's really exciting. I love the space program. There's so many benefits that we've gotten as a society from the fact that our nation was the preeminent leader in space for a very long time, and the technologies that we've developed, the medicines we've developed, all that sort of stuff is a good thing. So the fact that we are doubling down on returning to the moon, I think, is a very exciting thing, but we're not doing it right now. There's a lot of things that have to happen. So Artemis 2 is the spaceship, for lack of a better term. That's not probably the most accurate term, scientific term, but Artemis 2 is the craft that is going to be carrying 4 astronauts up into space. They will not be landing on the moon. They are, however, going to be it's going to be the first time that humans have traveled that far into space since NASA's Apollo missions ended in 1972. So they're going to go circle around the moon, but they're not landing on it. Now, rather than landing, this is going to be basically a test period to work a lot of things out for a future landing. Now, this mission will last approximately 10 days and was targeting a February 8th launch. That's why you've probably been seeing a lot of stuff pop up in social media about this is happening like in a couple of days. That was the plan, but unfortunately, NASA identified a few issues during a pre-launch test to fuel the rocket. Engineers pushed through several challenges during a 2-day test and met many of the planned objectives. That's a good thing. But they want to allow teams to review the data and conduct a second what's called a wet dress rehearsal. So they are now targeting March as the earliest possible launch opportunity. They also released the astronauts from quarantine. They'd been quarantined as required for a certain amount of time. Astronauts are let out of quarantine now, go take a breather, see their families, et cetera, instead of waiting all the way until March again. I imagine they'll have to re-enter quarantine here shortly. Now, this will be the first crewed flight of NASA's new Space Launch System, or SLS, rocket and Orion spacecraft. Both are designed to carry humans into deep space and pave the way for future moon landings and fingers crossed, future opportunities to land on Mars. Whew, I am excited about that. The future is bright. Now, the spacecraft will carry astronauts further from Earth than any humans have gone before, and they will return at speeds around 25,000 miles per hour, faster than any previous crewed mission. They will lose contact with any other human for about 40 minutes while they are on the back side of the moon. So when they leave Earth and they kind of slingshot around the moon, when they get to the back side of the moon relative to Earth, there's going to be about a 40 or 41-minute period, NASA said, where they will be completely out of touch with any other human in the fucking galaxy. That's wild. I mean, you can say, oh, there's humans right now that are out in the middle of the Canadian woods somewhere, miles and miles and miles from the nearest human, and they're pretty alone too. The fact that these people are not on the same planet as any other humans and out of touch with any other humans, period, I would argue that those 4 people will be the most alone a human can be, at least at this point in history. I don't think it's possible to be more alone than they will be in those 40 minutes, completely on their own. Now, who's going? Well, there's 4 astronauts who will be flying on this mission. These 4 people, I think, 3 of them are American, 1 is Canadian. They all, even the fact that they are volunteering to go do this, I think instantly makes them heroes in my mind. These are going to be people to look up to. First up, we've got the commander of Artemis 2, Reed Weissman. He's a NASA astronaut and the former chief of NASA's astronaut corps with extensive space flight experience. And then we've got the pilot for Artemis 2. That's Victor Glover. He's a NASA astronaut and U.S. Navy test pilot, bringing strong operational and flight expertise to the mission. And then we've got Christina Koch, who is a mission specialist for Artemis 2. She's a NASA astronaut and a record-setting spacewalker who previously spent a record 328 days in space. Wow. And then finally, we've got the Canadian, Jeremy Hansen. He's another mission specialist for Artemis 2, and he's representing the Canadian Space Agency. He's a former fighter pilot and space scientist who will be the first non-American to fly beyond low Earth orbit. So that's pretty cool. Suck it, China and Russia. All right, so what are they doing out there, right? These 4 are going up, hopefully in March, in Artemis 2, going to go circle around the moon. This is a test run for systems and processes. They are checking everything from life support systems to communications and crewed mission operations. Obviously, the operational side of this is sending humans into space, not just a satellite or other things like that. There's a lot of things that they got to work the kinks out on and test. They'll also be running health and human performance experiments to better understand the impact of deep space travel on astronauts, including radiation exposure, sleep patterns, and immune functions. Now, why are they even doing this in the first place, right? Well, Artemis 2 is a critical stepping stone toward Artemis 3. Oh, buddy, it gets better. Which will be the first crewed moon landing since the Apollo 17 mission in 1972. So we are going back to the moon, but it's not Artemis 2. It'll be Artemis 3 in hopefully a couple years from now. So what are we doing? We're trying to plan for a sustainable lunar presence that includes bases on the moon and science stations. I assume similar to kind of like what we've got in Antarctica, and the possibility of building a gateway for longer human missions, including a potential Mars expedition in the future. That is so fucking exciting. The future is now. This marks a shift from short test flights to real human exploration beyond Earth's orbit for the first time in a generation. This is so exciting. Now, we're not the only ones interested in the moon. I do think that there is a little bit of a renewed space race going on again. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more collaboration between countries than there was at the height of the Cold War. But I do think that there's a lot of people getting very interested in what's on the moon, having a presence on the moon, what that means for power dynamics on Earth. One thing that I'll point out is we're not the only ones interested in building infrastructure on the moon. There's a Japanese-based company that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. They want to build something called the Luna Ring around the moon. This is a conceptual, large-scale Japanese engineering proposal to construct an almost 7,000-mile-long solar power belt around the moon's equator. Now, the images I saw of this are wild. It looks like Saturn's rings, but metal and going around the moon. What are they going to do with that? It's going to generate, convert, and then beam down unlimited solar energy to Earth via microwaves and lasers. And they are saying, buckle up for this, they might start construction as early as 2035. Folks, that is not very far away for building on the moon. So a lot of things are in progress right now. Um, as bringing it back to America, though, and just this American spirit of exploration, we were the first to put a man on the moon. We pushed west. We went to the New World. Uh, as Americans, it's in our blood to push the limits of what we can do as humans, right? And push the limits of exploration. And I think that this push to the moon, yeah, I know it's an expensive program. I know that we have a lot of problems here on Earth. I think that, yes, we must keep our eye on the ball here on Earth and here at home in the United States, but we do need to make sure that we've got some people that we are funding space operations and we are funding the scientists and astronauts that are going to make the future better for us. We have to have a long-term strategy, and that long-term strategy as a nation, as a people, probably should include increased capability in space and putting people on the moon, similar, and having a permanent presence there, similar to what we do with the International Space Station. That makes a lot of sense as far as having a jumping off point for deeper space travel. I mean, the more technology advances, some of the things that they're working on as far as sources of power and how deep space travel might be possible in the, let's call it, the next 100 years, like it makes sense for us to start building that infrastructure now. And just overall, what it does for us as a country, for our self-esteem as a country, to see that American flag up there on the moon in a new place, to be going further than any humans have ever gone into space before on Artemis 2. Like, that's good for the soul of our country. That's good for us as a people. It's inspiring to our children. This is an event that when that Artemis 2 launches and when Artemis 3 goes back to the moon, you're going to go crowd around the TV and watch it with your kids, I hope. Watch it with your parents. Watch humans go further into the future, basically, pulling us along with them. And there's one quote that I like to think of. This is not the quote of the week, but I wanted to bring up this quote from a former president, John F. Kennedy. He said, quote, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." Quote. I mean, it gives me like fucking chills even as I say it. I say this to my daughter all the time. I go, "Hey, why do we do things?" And she says, and she knows to reply, "Because they're hard." Right? We do things because they're hard. We chase the hard things. Going to the moon, building bases there, of course it's not easy. We're not doing it because it's easy or low-hanging fruit. We're doing it because it's hard. Why? Because we're fucking Americans. And that's what we do. We do the hard stuff. We make the hard choices. We make the hard investments. We go further, faster than anybody else. That's something to be proud of. I'm fucking stoked to be going back to the moon eventually. Again, if you're seeing social media reels pop up right now saying we're going back to the moon like next week, no, we're not. But we're starting that progress, that process, right? To make progress towards landing on the moon again, landing humans on the moon again, and then who knows what the future holds from there. I really am just absolutely stoked. Now, I think it's interesting, this is not just NASA alone. I think this is in recognition of just the world that we live in right now. The Artemis program isn't being run by NASA alone. It's designed as a hybrid capability with the government and commercial partners working together, particularly Jeff Bezos, his company Blue Origin, and Elon Musk's SpaceX, which each play different complementary roles in that ecosystem. So, yeah, two guys that were mentioned, again, not saying they're guilty, but mentioned in the Epstein files. They are partnering with NASA. Their companies are partnering with NASA on this project, on the Artemis missions. Now, SpaceX is directly involved with the Artemis missions through its role as NASA's contractor for the Human Landing System, or HLS. And that's the spacecraft that will actually take astronauts from lunar orbit, so their orbit around the moon, and down onto the moon's surface and back. This Starship variant is designed to dock with a Gateway or Orion in lunar orbit and then ferry astronauts to the moon and back. And this is the first time a commercial company has been contracted to build a human lunar lander in history. That's always been the purview of NASA in the past. SpaceX may also play a role in delivering logistics cargo, supporting crew rotations, and transporting fuel or modules to a future gateway that orbits the moon. Now, Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander was selected as part of NASA's HLS contract along with SpaceX's Starship. All right. They'll be working together on that project. And Blue Origin is also involved in power systems and propulsion tech that NASA plans to use on the lunar surface, including nuclear power units, surface mobility support, and fuel depots that are critical for Artemis 4 and later missions. So Artemis 2 is the next thing going up in a month here. Artemis 3 lands on the moon. They're looking at Artemis 4 and later. And that's, kind of focused on long-term habitats and sustained science operations on the moon. Now, by using commercial partners, this is where I think this makes a lot of sense. NASA hopes this will foster competition in both cost and innovation, and to create an environment for future commercial space travel that generates revenue. If this is on just NASA alone, NASA ultimately is a government entity. I believe that there needs to be outside contractors involved with this, but NASA needs to remain the lead. And I do think that everything that these contractors are doing, at least in the near term, needs to remain FOIA, Freedom of Information Act-able. There needs to be max transparency with the public, right? In the future, if space travel becomes no different than taking an Uber somewhere, then sure, we can lay off that a little bit. But where we're currently at with space travel and space exploration, I think it's good that we have commercial partners. Those government contractors, those still need to be accountable to taxpayers. And so I hope that's something that our political leaders are taking into account. While we're on the subject of space, and this is why I say we need to keep contractors accountable and transparent to the public. For the culture section this week, I want to talk about a new documentary that came out recently. It's called The Age of Disclosure. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It's a feature-length documentary directed by Dan Farah, and it's featuring 34 U.S. government officials. It claims there has been an 80-year global cover-up of non-human intelligent life and a secret war among major nations to reverse engineer advanced technology of non-human origin. Okay? So we're talking UAPs, we're talking, formerly unknown aerial phenomena. It's kind of the new term for UFO, unknown flying object. And this is interesting stuff, right? And in this documentary, it's, it has multiple interview subjects. It's got 34 of them. And initially, when I first started watching this, some of them, one guy in particular, seemed like he was reading off of a teleprompter or a script or something like that. So I was initially a little bit skeptical about the veracity of this documentary. If you've got people like reading a script, I firmly believe documentaries, the only people that should be reading off of a script is the narrator, right, or the director. The people being interviewed, though, should be just sort of talking off the cuff, unedited. And it seemed like that was going on in the beginning, but then things really started to get interesting. And I will say that feeling of people talking off a teleprompter kind of went away. That was just, kind of in the beginning there. And I think it was the way they just organized the initial hook of the documentary. But, all of these people that they had on there, they had the credentials to back up their claims. There were politicians and bureaucrats from both sides of the aisle in this documentary, and everyone from the sort of the tactical level Air Force security forces guys that have been involved in some of these, for lack of a better term, incidences, all the way up to policy level decision makers, involved in some of this stuff. So this was not just like some wacko that says that he was abducted by aliens that they pulled into a documentary. These are serious people, fighter pilots, security personnel, government officials that have a lot to use, a lot of reputational risk by coming out and being a part of this. And they all did it because they are concerned about national security. And sort of one thing that really caught my attention right off the bat was the fact that there's this thing called the Legacy Program. Okay. And this is the thing that goes all the way back to what they reference as going all the way back to the 1940s when there were these initial discoveries of crashed craft of unknown origin, that sort of stuff. So they've had 80 years of sort of being the go-to people, but they're not like, it's kind of a black program, right? Like it's not officially acknowledged, and allegedly they're funded by misappropriated funds that are appropriated by Congress for other reasons, but they're misappropriated to fund this program, and it's been going on for a long time. According to the documentary, the legacy program consists of representatives from the CIA, U.S. Air Force, Department of Energy, and major U.S. defense contractors. Now, that doesn't mean that the director of the CIA knows everything about this, or that the Secretary of the Air Force or whatever. No, these are, from what it sounds like, these are very compartmentalized programs within each of those entities that come together as a part of this general affiliation that is referred to as the legacy program. What I thought was interesting is, you would think a documentary about uh, aerial phenomena that we don't know what they are, and basically aliens, right? And talking about the existing of aliens, you'd think that the antagonist of this documentary would be the UAPs, the aliens. It's really not. It's actually the way this documentary is designed is that the legacy program is framed as the antagonist, because these are the people that are allegedly keeping all these other people that want to be whistleblowers on this and think that the truth should be out there and are concerned about national security and all these other things, keeping them hushed up, and allegedly going so far as to threaten to or actually kill people over it to keep the secret. Um, that's all really interesting, and I think that the mere existence of this program kind of confirms, or at least lends credence to, the idea that there is a deep state. Like, this seems like the definition of a deep state that is a part of the government, but not accountable to taxpayers, not accountable to legislators, not accountable to any of these people. And that is a problem, to put it bluntly. Some other interesting things that were talked about, though, is these folks that are on like the UAP task force, and this is a different entity that was started in recent years as basically a response to the legacy program, to on behalf of legislators to go say, like, hey, go figure out what we know about this and what we don't know, and basically go start snooping around. They came up with 6 characteristics that define UAP. They call them the observables, right? These are the observables that help us identify, okay, what we're looking at is a UAP. Now, the documentary, one of the guys in the documentary cites these 6 observables as one of them being speed. He notes that we don't have anything faster than about 4,000, that goes faster than 4,600 miles per hour, outside of things like missiles or spacecraft that are re-entering the atmosphere. I mentioned earlier, Artemis 2 will re-enter the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. These are things that are crashing to the Earth. They're not maneuvering through the skies, right? As far as things that we can maneuver through the skies with, piloted and all, and it's in the atmosphere, all of that, we top out at about 4,600 miles per hour. They've observed UAPs going over 40,000 miles per hour in, again, normal atmospheric conditions. So incredible speed is one of the observables. Then we've got instant acceleration. Multiple people described these things as going from complete standstill to incredible speeds that are barely fathomable, from just a cold start. They also, the third observable is low observability. The documentary notes that the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, has significant gaps in its ability to detect UAPs. And they kind of note that, hey, if we are taking this seriously, the FAA should be tracking everything in the sky, not just some of the stuff, not just the things that have their transponders turned on or things like that. And I think that's a legitimate critique, right? And then they also UAPs, the fourth observable is they are capable of transmedium travel. That means they can basically effortlessly go from flying through the air, through space, up into space, and then back down and through water without ever losing speed or having any noticeable effects of resistance or gravity on it. So the UAPs are capable, by definition, of transmedium travel. I think it's also interesting to note, just talking about they can go through air, space, and water like it's nothing. I think it's interesting to note that when we think about UAPs and who might be in them and where they come from and all of that, we tend to think of them as just strictly extraterrestrial, right? Like they are from a different planet. They are not from Earth. They are from somewhere else in the solar system or the galaxy or the universe, right? Like they are somewhere else. I think there's two other possibilities though, and I'm not the first person to say this, but maybe they're extraterrestrial, but maybe they're interdimensional. Maybe they're from Earth, but from a different dimension, right? And if you say, Marty, that sounds like a bunch of hogwash. Well, I mean, as a Christian, I already acknowledge two different dimensions, hell and heaven. They're talked about in the Bible, right? Like, so, and most people on earth acknowledge the existence of other dimensions, but they're usually talking about it in a religious context, right? And so we already kind of acknowledge that. So, maybe these things are from Earth or from, around Earth, but from a different dimension, and they are capable of interdimensional travel, but not great distances across time and space. And then there's also the possibility that they are not extraterrestrial, they are not interdimensional, but they are capable of traveling outside time. Said another way, capable of time travel. Are these future humans coming back to this time that we're seeing? Are these past humans coming forward? Are these beings that existed on Earth in a different time, but went as far as we can observe them extinct, and they now travel throughout time and they're observed? That's possible too. So it's these things, they're capable of going through air, space, and water, that transmedium travel. I think that they could come from a variety of different sources of origin: extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or outside of time. All right, back to the observables. The fifth observable is they don't observe gravity. They are anti-gravity. They are not beholden to the laws of gravity or physics, apparently. And then, and you can observe so much in some of these, like fighter pilot camera footage that has been released. It's pretty wild. And then there's also biological effects for humans that come into contact with UAPs. The documentary cites people who have been in contact with these UAPs as having horrific burns on the exterior of their body, having internal scarring not observable from the exterior, as well as developing autoimmune diseases. They said, one guy in the documentary said that there's a 25% mortality rate for people that work on UAPs or within these programs within 7 years of contact with a UAP. That makes sense, right? These are probably high radiation, exotic materials, that sort of stuff, things that just humans haven't been exposed to before. So I'm not shocked that humans that are going near these things are having some pretty serious adverse effects. So those are the 6 observables that characterize a UAP: speed, instant acceleration, low observability, transmedium travel, anti-gravity, and biological effects. Now, going next, a big part of the documentary talked about basically there's a secret war going on and the impacts that all UAPs have on national security. And I think these are very valid concerns. By the way, this is the reason most of these like politicians and bureaucrats cite as saying, hey, this is why I'm coming forward, because we need to take this seriously. I think even Marco Rubio, who's in the documentary, said like, hey, we didn't think it was possible for terrorists to come over here, train on commercial aircraft, and then ram planes into buildings and knock down some of our most prominent skyscrapers until they did it. We didn't think that the Japanese were capable of attacking Pearl Harbor and using advanced torpedoes and all these other things until they did. And so the point a lot of these guys are trying to make is like, hey, these are serious threats. They are displaying capabilities that are not anywhere in the realm of what we are currently capable of doing. So we need to figure out what's going on, acknowledge out in the open that this is a thing, and kind of put everybody's brain power on top of this. Specifically, when we look at the effects on national security, the Soviets allegedly recovered a tic-tac-shaped UAP, which is interesting because we spotted a tic-tac-shaped UAP via fighter pilots that got footage of it recently in the past few years. But they allegedly recovered one. And this was in 1989, so right around the fall of the Soviet Union, along with 4, here's where it gets wild, hold on to your butts, along with 4 humanoid beings inside this tic-tac-shaped UAP. And they also captured an advanced directed energy weapon. And that's where we get into, okay, well, Are they capable of reverse engineering that stuff? China, we know, has recovered UAPs, so the documentary claims. Are they trying to reverse engineer alien tech? Now, we've been recovering UAPs for about 80 years now, according to the documentary. And the documentary features a source who said that in 1964, there were 3 UAPs that landed at Holloman Air Force Base, and a non-human being came out of one of them and made contact with uniformed service members at the base, as well as a few CIA personnel. That's wild. That's a wild accusation to make, to say that there's been actual contact made between these things that are possibly out there and us as humans. I have to believe that there's pictures out there of that. You can't tell me nobody out on the airfield that day, if that actually happened, there's not pictures somewhere of that meeting. Now, we have to think about this from a couple of different angles, right? UAPs have already been allegedly, again, according to the documentary, responsible for turning on Russian nuclear weapons, kind of just showing off the fact that, like, hey, we can turn this shit on and there's not a thing that you can do about it. And if we want to, we can make you guys start a nuclear war with each other. It was kind of a flex is what it seems. And regardless of origin, any UAP that's violating our sovereign airspace, that's concerning. We should have complete dominance of our own sovereign airspace in the United States, right? So if we've got these things that are running around unchecked and we don't know what they are and they're more capable than us, that's a problem. All right. And then we have to think about the fact that this isn't an exclusively American problem. UAPs aren't just showing up in American territory. They're showing up around the world, and other countries are potentially crashing or having interactions around the world. So are our adversaries getting access to this advanced alien tech, right? Will that potentially give them a leg up on us? Do our adversaries think that we have access to alien tech? And so now they're thinking about, like, this is basically an arms race that's starting because everybody thinks that the other is developing advanced alien technology that will put them not just generations, but potentially centuries ahead of everybody else in capability. So this is a serious thing. We need to, I think that's one of the biggest reasons that we need to be talking about this out loud of, hey, if we've got actual evidence of this and every sign points to we do, then we need to be talking about this out loud. All right? Like, serious thing. Now, basically everyone with knowledge of these programs claims they cannot reveal classified information because there is fear and threat of either assassination or imprisonment. And these guys don't seem like they are bluffing on that front. There's been testimony in Congress, hand on the Bible, like testimony saying as such. One quote in the documentary stood out to me. They said, you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. And they use that to explain kind of like why the legacy program exists and why there are some people that want to keep all this stuff secret, is because if we do have this advanced tech, if we tell our own people, then obviously all of our enemies will know that too. And again, will that start an arms race? How will that change the dynamics, the political landscape, all of that, right? So that's an interesting point. But, classified information is revealed all the time. There's constantly leaks. It's actually pretty impressive that there have been no serious leaks out of this. Obviously, there's these whistleblowers that have come forward, and that's something. But there's still things that they aren't telling us, So the threat must be very real for these people not to say everything that they know. What I'm wondering is, who's the original classification authority for this stuff? And is all of this under government classification authorities? Is some of it outside the purview of the government because we're working with these defense contractors? Remember, large contractors, military contractors, are part of the legacy program. That's interesting. Now, basically the way this classification would work under the legacy program is, because the Department of Energy is involved, the Department of Energy has their own classification system that's outside of the Department of Defense's, the CIA, the intel communities, all that stuff. They have their own classification system because of powers granted to them by the Atomic Energy Act that was passed way back when. And that's what they've been used to be able to say, to deny high-level politicians, in some cases even sitting presidents, access to some of this information. Now, contractors that they're working with, they're outside of a classification system. They're outside of the ability for Freedom of Information Act requests to hold them account. And they're also outside of, government turnover, political cycles, things like that, the hems and haws of budgets and different things like that. By keeping it in the hands of defense contractors, well, you're removing some of those obstacles, but you're also taking it outside the cycle of accountability to our legislators, to the taxpayers that are funding it, and all of that different stuff. So, and at the end of the day, it puts enormous power in the hands of unelected businessmen, right? Like that's a problem, especially if these businesses possess technology greater than the United States government. That's a problem if that's the case. Now, part of why there's such a stigma around this is because this legacy program has created that stigma, allegedly. They have ran influence operations inside the United States and around the world. They have made it so that public opinion equates anybody that talks about UAPs or aliens or any of that is like they're a crackpot. They're full of it. They are loony bin, right? Like they've made the general society view via all these different levers that they can pull throughout the media and all that sort of stuff. They've made it so that anybody that does come forward is seen as just crazy, right? So it's an insurance policy against what they've already established as, hey, we're either going to kill you or imprison you if you speak about classified information, aka the information we don't want the public to know about, at least yet. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of legislators that are like, hold the fuck on. Who do you think you are? Like, we're here for oversight. We're elected. We have a problem with this. So there was something called the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, and that was sponsored by Senator Chuck Schumer, who's a Democrat from New York, along with Senators Mike Rounds, a Republican from South Dakota, Kristen Gillibrand, Democrat from New York, Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, and Martin Heinrich, a Democrat from New Mexico. So this was a bipartisan bill, act that was put forward, and it had strong, very enforceable language. And there was things in there, the documentary talked about, there was things in that act that basically asserted eminent domain over anything to do with UAP materials, saying it doesn't matter if you're a government contractor, if you've got technology like this, that is property of the United States government because of national security reasons. And eminent domain is a very powerful tool. And so they put that in there. Well, it had pretty strong pushback from other politicians. And I kind of made me ask, like, okay, well, who's pushing back on this? This seems like something everybody should be in support of. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if these legacy program folks have certain politicians that are like basically bought and paid for, right? Or these defense contractors with their well-known lobbying apparatuses, right, are making sure that there's opposition to anything like this. And when I looked into it, basically the only thing I could see cited was that there are members of the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee that are opposing this act. And when you look at this, again, this is not just all Republicans or Democrats. The House Intelligence Committee has 13 Republicans and 12 Democrats on it. And the Senate Armed Services Committee has 14 Republicans and 13 Democrats. There's enough of them between those two places that are causing a stink and blocking this thing from actually getting through. And I got to ask, like, why? What's in it for you? Like, the only thing I can think of is they are being either bribed in some way or blackmailed in some way. That's the only thing that I can think of. Now, there's been more recent efforts since that 2023 UAP Disclosure Act. There's been the UAP Transparency Act, as well as the UAP Disclosure Act of 2025. That was a NDAA, or National Defense Authorization Amendment, and the UAP Whistleblower Protection Act. None of those have been passed yet, from what I can see, and are, again, they're being deliberated and receiving pushback. Now, I watched this documentary, right? And I'm not like your traditional conspiracy theorist or anything like that. But what I will say is I'll evaluate new information as it comes. And I understand that documentaries can be edited in a way to make things seem very dramatic and truthful and things like that. But there is such thing as creative editing and all of that. But between this documentary and everything else out there and the types of people that were speaking on the record, again, people that have stuff to lose, that could suffer great reputational damage, right? Like, that makes me sort of believe at least some of this, that there's got to be some truth there. This feels like a where there's smoke, there's fire situation. There's a lot of smoke. Now, I'm still a Christian that's strong in his face, but I acknowledge at this point that God's creation might and probably does extend beyond Earth and even our solar system, right? And into the wider galaxy, the universe. The Bible talks about the universe, in fact, and that it is more likely than not that non-human intelligent life, not of this world, exists and is also a part of God's creation. I don't think that the existence of UAPs or non-human intelligent life that is not of this world, I don't think the mere existence of that is somehow at odds with my Christian faith, or that I believe in God, or that Jesus Christ died for my sins. Like, I don't think that those things are at odds. I think that maybe we just don't have the whole picture yet, right? So I don't know. I will end with the actual, I've said a few quotes throughout this podcast, but the actual quote of the week that I wanted to point out, because we've talked about, Artemis 2, as well as this Age of Disclosure documentary. I think that this quote from Arthur C. Clarke, he was a science fiction author, is very appropriate. He said, "Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying." Well said, Arthur. Well said. All right. On from that to just some life stuff here. We like to talk about a little bit of life, whether it's motivation, my own goals, what's going on in my world. I just have a hunch that, the things that I go through, the things that I think about are not exclusive to me, right? Like, I think that what I go through is what a lot of other people are going through. So maybe you are seeing this yourself. I want to bring up the other day. My daughter came into my wife and I's room towards bedtime. She was supposed to have been in bed and sleeping for a while, and she was really upset about something that a kid at school showed her. And apparently this was, I don't remember the name of it, but it was some like puppet type of show for kids, but it was extremely creepy. And only one episode of it was released back in the early 70s. And it has like basically demonic undertones to it, like just really creepy stuff. And apparently the production company that made this, again, they made this for kids. It was pulled from the air immediately. Only one episode was aired, and the production company, this is the only thing that they ever made. Really interesting. Anyways, I'd never heard of this before, but apparently some kid at school was like, "Hey, check this out," and showed my daughter. And my daughter's like a polite person, and she, didn't want to not watch it after she became uncomfortable. And apparently it was like a 20-minute long episode that she watched. And while she was sitting in bed at night, she felt like, she was being watched and all these other things. It's just that thing that she watched was really disturbing to her. So she comes into my wife and I's room just, in tears, telling us that she can't sleep. And, why? Well, I watched this thing at school. It really upset me. And so we talked to her about this idea of, you have to guard what you let into your mind and into your heart. Now, this is something I've known and subscribed to for a long time. Like, I'm not a big horror movie guy. I've really tried to protect the things that come into my consciousness, because it does affect you. And I've been that way since I was a kid. And thankfully, my parents instilled that in me and were very protective about the things that I would watch or listen to and things like that. So, it's not something that I had thought to bring up with my daughter yet, but this was the time. I was like, oh my gosh, she's in 6th grade. Like, yeah, this is about the time when kids are going to start bringing things to school that are not something kids should be looking at, but it's just a natural thing that happens, especially in the age of kids having smartphones and laptops and all these other forms of media that just weren't available when I was that age. And so the potential for being exposed to things that kids shouldn't be exposed to is greater than it has ever been. Right. And so we had this really serious talk with her about, hey, you've got to really be careful about what you watch, what you listen to, all that, what you let into your mind and what you let into your heart. And you have to have basically the courage to walk away from a friend to say, hey, I don't want to watch this, or hey, this makes me feel uncomfortable, or something like that. Even if you're at a friend's house or something like that, and somebody wants to put on a movie, I know that's going to happen at some point. Maybe it's a household where their parents are okay with them watching horror movies and things like that. Well, I know that's not going to sit well with my daughter. And we told her, like, hey, if you're at a friend's house and they, all your friends want to put on a certain movie and it makes you uncomfortable, either just ask them if we can watch something else because that makes you uncomfortable, or if you don't want to say that, just say that you're not feeling well and call us and we'll come pick you up. But don't look at things that are, are going to upset you, or the minute you are watching something and realize it's upsetting you or it's something that you don't want to be watching, break contact, you know. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit that she had to experience this. And you want to protect your kids. As a father, I want to protect my kids. And you realize that it's not just their physical safety, it's also their emotional and mental safety as well. Like, we have to protect that. We have to prepare them for life. Of course, we have to prepare them for the rigors of life. They have to understand that there will be things that they encounter that are unsettling to them or hurtful to them, whatever. That's going to happen eventually, but they don't need to experience that as kids. And that was one of the other things that I told her was, hey, look, you were, through no fault of your own, going to have to witness something horrible at some point in your life. It's just the way life works, whether it's the death of a loved one or something on TV, like whatever it is, right? Like, you're going to have to experience it at some point. Don't do it voluntarily. Don't subject yourself to disturbing things when there's no need to. When you have a choice in the matter, you have the choice to walk away and not look at it. And I don't know, it was a real sort of wake up call for me. And so I guess my message to everybody else that has kids, or is planning on having kids in the future, that hey, once your kids get to a certain age, be prepared for the fact that, and it's going to sneak up on you, but be prepared for the fact that your kids are going to bring, um not bring, your kids are going to be exposed to things at school that maybe you are not okay with. That could be everything from kids bringing things like porn or sexual material to school. It could be horror movie type stuff. It could be racist memes and things like that. It could be all manner of different things that are just not appropriate for kids. But once they start getting into that fifth grade, sixth grade, certainly once you get into middle school, and now you've got other kids in the same school that are now teenagers and stuff, like, it's going to happen. So have that conversation with your kids. Don't wait for them to run into that situation. You're not going to be able to stop it every time, and ultimately it's up to them to shield themselves. But at least talk to them and forewarn them. Hey, there's some nasty stuff out there. You don't want that in your head. You don't want that in your heart. Like, do your best to avert your eyes to get away from that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I hope you as parents don't have to deal with that. I wish kids didn't have to deal with this. I wish my kids didn't have to think about this, but it's the world we live in, and it's not exclusive to this generation. It was the same thing when I was a kid. When I first started seeing things I didn't want to see, it was about middle school, it was about this age. So it checks out. It checks out. All right, well, time to talk about something I think is pretty neat. Again, I am not sponsored by these companies that I bring up or these things or anything like that, but I've got the Fellow, that's the company, Fellow, Carter Move mug. It's got, this lid here and all of that. Very, very, let me put it in front of my face so it's in focus here. See this, I've got some stickers on there and all of that. I love this thing. Now, it is both form and function, right? Like, extremely functional. It keeps coffee hot all day. Even sitting here with the lid off, my coffee is still piping hot. And I'm like damn near an hour and a half into this podcast right now. And it also will keep things very cold if you want to. This lid, it's got a rubber gasket in there that really seals this thing down. So I can screw this thing down and it just looks like you've almost got like a little pill or something like that. I'll throw that in a backpack, in a duffel bag, whatever. It doesn't matter. It can be rolling around in the back of my truck. It doesn't matter. It's not going to spill a drop of liquid. This thing is airtight. Now, it's also one of the things that I love about it is it's, one, the shape of it. It's skinny enough that it will fit in the cup holders of your vehicles. That's one problem I've had with like thermoses and things like that before, is that it's too big to fit in the cup holder of my vehicle. This one fits. It's big enough. It's also got this awesome, you can see, I'm pulling it out here, this splash guard. You can see a little bit of coffee dripping off it. But this thing snaps in and it goes right in here. So you can be bumping around the road, holding it in your hand, or it's in your cup holder, and it's going to keep the coffee from splashing out. That's awesome. That is so cool. I love that. And yeah, as far as the actual specs on it, you know, it's 18/8 stainless steel exterior. It's got a ceramic interior, so there's no metallic or plastic taste with this. I think that the only plastic on this thing is there's just a little bit in the cap here. They come in a few different sizes, actually. I believe there's like a 8, a 12, and a 16 ounce. And there's about a dozen different colors that you can pick from on this. So it doesn't come in just black. And you can even personalize it right on the website. I've got both my wife and my sister personalized mugs with this. I love the mug that much. I give it as a gift to people all the time because everybody needs a good coffee mug like this. But I'll get it personalized with their name. It's really cool. This one that I have is actually personalized. It's one that I got while I was at Black Rifle Coffee. It is... Yeah, that is not a sticker. That is etched right into the mug. So you know, if you've got a company or something like that, you can get your logo put on there, whatever. You can do all that right there on the website. Really, really cool. Yeah, the Fellow Carter Move mug. Again, I'm not sponsored by Fellow. I have a bunch of their products, but I'm not sponsored by them. I don't have like some affiliate link that I'm going to push to you. I'm just trying to put you on to stuff that I think is pretty neat. That's all. All right. All right, friends. Thanks for coming to the Marty Party. Join me again next week. If you don't want to miss a single show, make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow if you're coming to me via Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you later.
It's a Marty Party. It's a Marty Party.